There was already a basic dwelling on the property, and the project had attracted an investor who pledged to contribute $150,000 into new development. Her name was Ariel. The hundreds of inquirers with Visa cards ready all said the same thing. They just wanted video proof of the concept and the features around the island. Sure thing. So David notified the vendors he'd be visiting up for this purpose, and they assisted with first access. A set of initial inquirers who had expressed interest in promoting the music festival island stays were invited to help with the task, which included a one-night briefing to peruse the development vision of the property, outline what needed to be filmed and edited to demonstrate the weekend music festival concept to people, and that the job would then be to stay on and set the appointments and arrange travel for those who went ahead and booked from the videos were to contain the faces and voices of the people and the booking team clearly at the island music fans would be coming to. Nothing glamorous was offered. You can hear in some of the video footage that was retrieved and used by Nine that David paid for and never got, that the initial participants were even more impressed with what they saw than what they were shown. Channel didn't realize they'd made that point against themselves in their own article. You couldn't hide it if you used any footage of any guest before they met the island's version of Eddie. Before that, the three girls are happy in the car from Brisbane to the town called 1770. They were having a great time and volunteered to make food for everyone the next morning. They drove to Rockhampton happy, dancing in the car still after 2 days when it's just the band. Bill, the island's vendor, is a sudden downer to the mood, is disorganized, grumpy, and requested a part he didn't have from the marine supplier. He wants to be there when the band's there, but he hasn't organized what was required for a safe visit. David paid for the part. Bill asked him to pay for it because it made sense for him to pay for it. It was a general maintenance cost and David was buying the property. Patricia reappeared a third time, now 6 months after her Facebook posts, and 2 months after Channel 9's fake article stating he does not intend to put on or play at anything he puts on. She continued stalking with completely fake stories to prevent income. Even though David went to considerable cost to make the trip comfortable, Patricia wrote online on David's business pages that the group went in an old van, but they were in an air-conditioned current year model Toyota Kluger SUV. Pieces of video retrieved from the trip shows the group laughing and joking the whole time. That's just the vibes that get created with his projects. That's the vibe guests pay to be around and viewers online pay to watch. In Rockhampton, Monique confesses her GoPro camera is going flat and she forgot to bring a charging cable for it. David stops at Office Works to buy one and she keeps it without asking. What you're about to see is the reason why we're making this documentary, though. To follow the minute-by-minute trail of time periods, Channel 9 gave a false account of in order for the current viewer to see what really caused what. The group arrived on the beach to cross over to the island. Monique exclaimed, "Wow, is that your island?" It looked even better than the photos she'd seen. Looking to the right, Bill the island vendor is seen on the beach with a broken boat. He stated the outboard motor had a worn impeller bush, it couldn't go in the water. Bill had given David the wrong part number to buy in Rockhampton. David then had to drive from the beach at Obleby to Mackay to fix Bill's mistake. Before the journey, David called Ariel to see when she would be arriving with the supplies she had pledged to the trip and most importantly for the meeting that was arranged to finalize the payout of the remainder of the contract as previously discussed. She suddenly announced she wouldn't be turning up or bringing any food. She admitted she had been sent a fake news call police article by a girl called Honey as a link in an email and assumed the whole trip was made up. Ariel was apologetic when she realized the predicament she had left everyone and then hung up in shock and disarray. Channel 9's fake story had directly severed the investor from the project. David then drove the group to the town of Sarina and gave Monique and Maha $250 for 3 days' worth of groceries for 4 people. The girls bought whatever they liked. David and Kitty continued on to Mackay to obtain the part Bill had requested. David and Kitty returned back to Sarina. It had gotten dark now. The groceries were loaded into the SUV and David received a text from Bill that it was now too late to go across to the island. Even though Bill had caused the extra delays and expenses, David now paid to put the group up in a hotel for an extra night to travel over the next morning. Bill slept in his car on the beach. He was a very cheap guy. The island itself was paid for by 5 others. David parked the SUV and the group traveled up to the launch point with Bill. Bill was driving. David knew from growing up in Morton Island that it's customary in Australian beach culture and four-wheel driving that if you see someone bogged, especially on a rising tide, you stop and help till you know they're okay. Bill saw a fellow beachgoer bogged on the sand as they drove to the point, but instead Bill snarled, "Everyone's got their problems, and that's his," and kept on driving. The guy was waving in relief, but then his face dropped as Bill drove past him. The group arrived to meet Bill. He had refused access if he wasn't with the group. It came as a surprise that he wanted to stay the whole time, and it quickly became clear why. The group got to the launch point on the beach just across from the island. Bill suggested that he take the 2 girls over by himself first. It was a little weird, and in hindsight David felt the group should have gone 2 by 2 to keep an eye on him. To be professional and out of full disclosure, David by email made sure Bill was notified of the fake articles from July on September 4th, but he said he didn't care. Bill then used that favor as an opportunity to freak the girls out with the fake call police article. How do we know that? The girls' behavior completely changed. They were instantly rude, dismissive, argumentative, wasteful of food they requested, separated off and refused to do any of the pre-scheduled administrative work even though that's the reason they got to go. Maha had changed and was now wearing a yellow shirt. Monique was wearing a moon boot. All went to beach but 2 girls separated off. A meeting was called, without Bill, where the girls became somewhat amicable again, confirmed the schedule for the trip, and Monique even tended her watch to the table in the office as a timekeeper since there was no visible clock anywhere on the island yet. Some filming was then done. They had regrouped and morale was building. But Bill came in, saw the watch was giving the group organization and structure, picked it up and gave it back to Monique. She looked a little weirded out because it was helping the group get the jobs done. Why was he still even there? He suggested to show the group around the island more. The girls suggested a bonfire. After interacting with Bill separately again after the first meeting and video production, the girls became more distant again, and it turned out Kitty overheard Monique and Bill exchanging phone numbers and bonding over the fake news articles. The girls' plan from then on was to do no work, loaf around and eat David's food and excuse it all by saying, "We can do this because the TV said you're dangerous and these events aren't real," with nothing to back it up. While they were sitting on the island where others were about to arrive at the same as they did, they wanted the experience to themselves for free, even though office hours were only 9 to 12 and they could go to the beach the rest of the day if they completed video production and guest callbacks in the morning. They were being selfish, lazy, and thieves, and 9 was enabling it. It turned them into animals. They began flirting with Bill at the bonfire. He now had a reason to sabotage the trip, and the fake articles made it easy to do. That was its purpose. The next day, Monique had become very firm about the fact that she would never be releasing the footage to David that he paid for that was required to complete guest bookings and payments. These payments had now become critical to keeping the property after the fake articles had severed the student contracts at the Southport Hall and the investor contribution that was a backup to that. Monique needed the footage to be hidden and no new people. Otherwise, it was going to conflict with the Phage damsel in distress story she was trying to fabricate if the whole video reel got out. This selfish act had a number of consequences. It meant that hundreds of hard-working people on the waiting list then missed out, just so she could go back for free. It meant that they had agreed to assist with video and promotions that David had paid thousands of dollars for but didn't get it. That's what an actual scam looks like. Monique is an actual deceptive scam artist. She deceived hundreds of people for an unearned personal gain. The fake article turned her into one that weekend. Do you see how the articles operate now? And lastly, by closing the door to all the other excited guests, many whom needed a new life, it closed off the income stream to service the repayments, so it caused the $1 million deal to fall through that would have netted David around $3 million over the next 3 years. Also that Monique Thompson, who already lived in a Candleside residence on the Gold Coast with her mother and stepfather, could go back to the island for free. Kitty then yelled at Monique to provide this footage she had no right to keep for herself. Monique refused and kept it. If the 200 people on the marketing list saw this video, they'd all want to come up and she'd have to work to stay there. This way, if she cuddled up to Bill, she wouldn't have to. She took advantage of the trust David had in her to help launch the project. Kitty was furious. David asked Monique to meet with him separately till Kitty could calm down and to get the facts. They stood near the beach and he asked some basic questions. He asked her, "Is it true you swapped phone numbers with Bill with a view to coming back to the island for free while I'm on the contract, and I paid for you to come up here to get very specific and critical business tasks completed?" She said yes. Monique then said, "But I can do what I want." Kitty deserves a medal for both her loyalty and for not punching her out. I imagine half the people on the inquiry list might now like to. Kitty had been through the trenches with all the scary and dangerous scenarios the fake articles had created, and now this selfish derelict was actively costing her band around $3 million over the next 2 years, just so she could go back to the island without having to do any work. Monique and Maha then wanted another bonfire. He wasn't there to pay for a holiday and host it. It was already bad enough Bill was taking the 2 girls around in David's boat and letting Monique drive the 4-wheel drive that came with the island, smashing the windscreen on a tree not looking where she was going. Early the next morning, David and Kitty could smell smoke. Monique, Bill, and Maha were all up early together. They had started packing the car without telling David or Kitty what was going on. Monique looked ill. She said she had a stomach ache. Kitty intuitively sassed her, asking if she'd interacted with Bill that night. Monique gagged and said nothing. Monique, Bill, and Maha looked shady. Something had happened at the bonfire Bill put on that David had declined. David asked Maha, "Did you guys have another bonfire last night?" Maha said no. As they drive out, the bonfire was still smoldering. These details were left out of the article, even though they were known. Bill used the chaos he caused and his interference with the band's income production that week to justify rescinding the agreement and took all the money David paid. Bill was the scam artist and he'd been doing it to his family for years, letting them pay their share of the expenses on the place even though they never went there, and while Bill scared off buyers to keep the jig going. Bill also had the smallest percent holding in the syndicate at only $50,000. Still, with the systems of a weekend island festival in his hands, David simply considered a temporary alternative venue and keep going. He shortlisted a series of islands the group could hop to and have the same experience. He tested it and it was appealing and had less overhead. Kitty chatted with a girl called Shayla online for around 2 years before late September 2015. Kitty offered her friend the initial island hopping promoter ad to call back inquiries from a person's home office. Numbers would flow in from Facebook inquiries and be sent across to the promoter, who would make the call in their home office and take a commission. They could opt to just do that or be part of events and video promotions as well. That was up to them. It was part of a solution to the Patricia problem. If promoters didn't know each other, they couldn't sabotage each other's event telesales job. Some just did the home office option, but in her initial, Shayla said she also wanted to come to the first island hopping venue in Moreton Bay. The risk was in whether or not they would follow the script properly. The same thing started coming up, that people who inquire on the internet want video to demonstrate things, and the band wanted to illustrate the difference between just going to these places and the experience they were putting on, so the band booked a date to show them. In a sweet way, the band booked it for the date the event Patricia sabotaged was supposed to be on, October 16, 2015. The concept was popular and Shayla Chandler showed interest in both the home office telesales and the island visits themselves. As Patricia and Bill had engaged in what's called tortious interference with the island contract, David had placed a caveat over the island so that there would be time to bring the investor back, find additional ones, resolve the losses caused by Patricia and Bill telling people not to assist the project, and build a reserve of music island fans to ultimately bring back to the original island once the problems were resolved. Patricia was out to sabotage David's events, and Bill wanted to prevent the island being sold by the other vendors who never went there. Shayla received training and a set of phone numbers and made some successful bookings for the November trip, which the group would film the promotion for on October 16th. They could get the island back by January and bring the guests from the November and December island hopping trips to Moreton and Fraser Island. The band had received 4 free passes to Movie World's Halloween Nights in return for appearing in one of the theme park's latest TV commercials. The free tickets were shared with the promo team. Some were busy with other work, but Shayla said she wanted to come along. The 3 dressed up in goth outfits, looked hot, and lined up for rides and haunted house trips together, walking around hands on hips over and over in the dark, laughing and taking videos and photos with each other. Yes, none of this was on the AK article. It was a fun night. No article mentions this. They just let Shayla say she'd never met them before October 16, 2015, when in fact there was also a half-day sales training for the home office gig, the Movie World Night Out, and a launch party for the island hopping weekend. Shayla attended all of these. There's a video of her at each one. Did Channel 9 hide this for the same reason that they hid footage of David playing and singing in his video clips while they told a story that he never plays? Did they hide the real background with Shayla to help her lie in the article they made? People are always excited because David's projects are simple, yet so good, and they drop off after finding or being sent the fake 9 article always right at the point, because they're dropping off in reaction to the 9 articles. Shayla was either blissfully oblivious or a setup all along. What's not in question, though, is that she was texted the day before, on Thursday 15th of October, and notified that the other members of the team had dropped off because of the fake news, but the trip was already booked. She could come if she wanted, up to her. Her response was clear. Silly people. So it's just us 3 going. Yes, see you at 7:15 a.m. Shayla, though, earlier that day had searched out a different ad not sent to her. She was sent staff wanted. The band was now testing a visibly separate experience called Island Girlfriend, where they would be married to the island for the weekend, which was a first trial solution to the problem caused by Monique going off with island vendors, not doing any work they were paid to do, and ultimately trying to sabotage the project. The band needed to prevent what Monique did from ever happening again. There was no second option before that. The news said there was no description of 2 separate experiences. But there was, and it was better for the band that they were separate, because as a sales and marketing test and measure of results, the band wanted to pit the different teams against each other to see who got better results. Those who did whatever they wanted versus those who had pledged to focus for the weekend. The band had even started revving up the 2 teams on the new ad posted long after Shayla had already securely started doing and getting results from the home office version of the job at her own place, and even when she knew others had opted to not go to the island because of other work, she still wanted to go and still continue with the home office telesales job. Instead of just staying in the role she had been shown and applied for, Shayla went the whole other way of her own free will. She texted David out the blue. "What's the Island Girlfriend application? Looks cool, X." Not entirely sure if she was right for it, David simply replied that he could tell her more about the thinking behind it the next day. He had already explained there was a problem with Monique on the island the previous month. This was a solution he was testing with part of the group who could opt in if they wanted. The goal was more sales, and Monique made 0, so it wouldn't be hard to beat an opponent with a work ethic like Monique. The most interesting point of clarity that she knew there was definitely 2 separate categories to choose between that she was making an informed, conscious choice about was her public Facebook comment on the new version of the ad that was never sent to her by Kitty. She said, confirming her role was just staff for the trip. Maybe I should switch teams to the island girlfriend option from staff only before she was even picked up to go to the ferry. As Channel 9 staff stalked the band's Facebook pages to message anyone who supported their events, it's likely this public post was what brought Shayla's interest to their attention as a target to cajole and threaten into playing victim in the next article, and her profile link on that Facebook comment was used to message her the fake article around 7 p.m. on the Friday night that David was supposed to be having his breakthrough event at a stadium but had settled for playing guitar on beach. Channel 9 was at it again and again, having fake profiles post links to their fake articles on David's business page throughout the evening of October 16th for Shayla to see. Shayla then stated she had never met David and Kitty before. She had suddenly deleted her 2-year Facebook chat history with Kitty in case it could be used in court to disprove things she was about to lie about. Shayla got right into it, coached by Patricia, the journalist they were attacking simply because he was putting on events for his albums. Remember, the guy from Brisbane who practiced 4 hours a day, went to the Pearl Jam concert, won the Best Alternative Album Award, 2 songwriting awards, played on Channel 10, who wrote all the albums, who was just trying to perform his music and make a living from it. Shayla acted really weird for someone who claimed to be scared she was in danger. She rang repeatedly, leaving cocky voicemails and text messages. Her language changed all of a sudden after 7 p.m. on October 16th to match the vocabulary of the 9 article, calling them scammer, etc., even when they organized to go to a resort. And that's exactly what they did, and everything Shayla said was a complete fabrication. She had never spoken to them like this before, and she'd known them for weeks. This is important because Shayla redeclared the false things she said in the articles under oath in a Sydney courtroom. More on that later. Shayla texted the band again days after she said she had run scared, admitting a weird fact that Patricia Higgins, the journalist who sabotaged David's event at the start of the year, the music school that was paying for the island, and now with this had been contacting her almost every day since the island trip. Shayla then said, again, this is all after the whole drink spiking claim on television. She said, ring me, I want to tell you why people are lying about you. Yes, Shayla kept in constant contact with the band after the 16th of October. Shayla and Patricia then added new fake articles to the campaign through the newspapers on November 14, 2015. They never would have even needed to develop island hopping if Monique had not have been coached to interfere with the island and to go there herself. David continued to get death threats from people who were misled by the July 24th and now the November newspaper articles, so decided to take immediate action before something irreversible happened as a result of the fake news attacks. David sought out once famous Brisbane newsreader Mike Higgins and miraculously found his number online. Mike Higgins answered, and the first thing he said was, "How did you get this number?" David answered, "Frankly, it was on Google." After telling Mike what had happened and what was now happening as a result, Mike suggested to simply ask Channel 9 to take down the offending material, and he asked to see if David could help get the number off of Google. After the call, David thanked him and made a complaint to the website to help Mike out. In early December 2015, David called Channel 9 and asked for the email address of their legal department and was given one. David sent a formal email outlining the facts that demonstrated that the article was not factual, potentially malicious, and causing death threats, and now it had been over 4 months. Could they remove it from the internet? This also constituted a formal concerns notice, a required step in the legal process of a defamation claim. They have now been notified that the material is harmful. 9 refused and would not take the offending material down. David warned that because they were creating danger in a person's life for their own profit, he would have to ask a court to step in if they could not give a reason why they were leaving up a fake article about event fraud when it was causing death threats. Wouldn't they be concerned about massive liability if that led to an injury? 9 still ignored the emails, so David filed an injunction against the offending material, naming the executive producer of the show as the respondent in his capacity as a representative of 9, being the proper person capable of producing and or removing problematic material. Executive means decision maker. The formal request to the district court offered indisputable evidence that the article was false and harmful. 9 finally responded by sending a lawyer to the injunction hearing from McPherson Kelly Lawyers in Brisbane. The government would not take down the material because Channel 9 argued that it wasn't the 9 network who put up the AK article and instead gave David a $4,000 bill essentially for asking them to stop the death threats. David had explained the article was creating misunderstanding and mistaken public hatred because it claimed he did not intend to put on or play at any of his events, when that was factually false because in reality he loved performing and often did so for free. 9 sought to punish David for asking for help, but the $4,000 bill wasn't enough to bankrupt him over because he had no other debts. So 9 asked for a special order to have a court staff member check over their bill in order to create a second bill to give David another $3,000 in charges to get the amount up over the $5,000 threshold. Now 9 had ruined his business and public image, kept the death threats going, and had now created a $7,000 bill in his name on top of the loss of income. It was corporate abuse of an up-and-coming entrepreneur. With no island hopping, no guitar studio, a new debt Channel 9 had created for them because they asked the government for help, death threats, and no venue even booking them for a free gig anymore, all because of the fake articles. The band's real estate agent found the 3 fake articles. They were kicked into the street.